Welcome one more day to Space and Harmony. One more chance to feel and remember that divine I amness, the divine identity, our authentic essence, the tree of life, in which we can really say, I am myself and not what the madness of the world wishes us to be. And manifesting this essence with clarity and determination is precisely the theme of this video, which is actually one of the most important, I'd say, because we will not be able to endure the level of friction that is taking place on Earth these days unless we are able to sustain our higher vibrations of consciousness, loving will, because as the beings of light wake up, the forces of darkness try to pull us down because they see their days are counted. And this means we must become more ourselves each day. Remember that when Master Yeshua was asked who he was, once he said, Enah, in Aramaic, which means I am, the manifestation of the divine intelligence, that loving will that opens a space in which the conscience expands, knowing itself with the growth of vitality, lacking any artificial life, and full of serenity, tranquility. Those qualities of the divine I amness is what we know as eating from the tree of life. And obviously that implies a stop eating from the tree of knowledge of good and bad, in which we are always struggling, running away from what we don't like, pursuing external things or states we think are satisfactory, supportive, a source of happiness. But by eating from the tree of knowledge, we always end up in a state of anxiety, restlessness, in a state in which we feel offended always by what others tell us, negative criticism, insults, attacks of all sorts, especially when we speak the truth. Be ready if you speak the truth, because you will be criticized and attacked. It's not people, but something in them, the darkness that tries to keep those people from awakening. And that state of restlessness and homelessness in which we feel many times is basically what, in some parables, like the parables of the talents, for instance, was called as the outer darkness, where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. And that is precisely hell, which is not a place where evil souls go after the death of the physical body. Even though some psyches might continue experiencing hellish states of consciousness after the death of the physical body. Hell is a state of consciousness, just as the so-called heaven. The kingdom of heaven is within you. That's the usual translation of something Master Yeshua said, which is very different. He used the expression Malkut, HaShamayim, the kingdom of the divine soul, we might say. Realize that sometimes he taught about the soul, referring to the so-called kingdom of heaven. As when he said, for instance, if you don't become like little children, you will not enter the kingdom of the divine soul. Notice that the Hebrew word usually translated as heavens is Shamayim, and Shamayim is comprised of two terms, Shin, which is fire, and Ma'im, which is waters. The fire of consciousness acting upon the emotional waters of existence, generating a vapor, a sublimation of energy, which is actually the divine soul, which is the manifestation of the divine verb, the loving will, the expansive conscience, pure life and serenity. This is a process of consciousness that leads us to conscience, which is already the integrated state of all those elements. We need a clear consciousness or perception in order to bring the fire and the water together. So we make divine soul. And thus the soul grows in stages. It goes from the state of embryo soul, it is born as a baby soul, and eventually becomes a little child that can learn. This is becoming like little children. Unfortunately, many souls remain on an embryo state, and the divine being, so to say, has to connect itself to other versions of that life, or even other lives. We'll see that later maybe. And there is another interesting link. The numeric value of the expression HaShamayim, the heavens, is 395 in geometric calculation, which is coincidentally the same numeric value as Neshamah, the word divine soul. There is no coincidence, as you can see. And this ancient idea of making a soul was very clearly expressed by the romantic poet John Keats in a wonderful letter that he wrote for his sister and brother. I leave you a link in the blog with some excerpts so you can read. They are some of the most beautiful things I've ever read. I admit it's not easy to read because in the 19th century English was somehow different and he writes in a strange way sometimes, but it's worth making an effort to understand. Because in that letter he expresses all this very beautifully. He says that the divine intelligence, which is the light he calls God, as the Master said, "You are the light of the world, I am the light of the world." That divine intelligence has no identity on its own and needs to grow in the human heart, learning from the surrounding environment of the world, where there are many opposite experiences, in the process he calls soul-making. Actually, from that letter comes one of his famous phrases. Some say this world is a vale of tears, but I say this is a vale of soul-making, which is the key, the essential action for which we came. Notice how most of us from childhood were induced to think of this world as a place for suffering, where we experience meaningless pain, something which is emphasized in the religious world. There is even a prayer to the Holy Virgin where believers ask the Holy Virgin to pray for them, sinners, as they go through the vale of tears. Because the religious mindset in which many of us got trapped in the past, and in which many are trapped right now, is a state in which the focus is on pain, on sin, on labor, struggle, and that's eating from the tree of knowledge of good and bad. That's not soul making, but rather soul losing, becoming soulless, so to say. This has much to do with the parable of the talents. He who has will be given, and he who has not, the little he was given will be taken from him. Because the dark forces of this world will obscure any trace of light that does not grow. So we must focus on the true living light, true love, instead of the suffering. Otherwise, we will be eaten up. And we must be able to declare by our own will that we are standing firm. We can cancel decrees at will, so our soul, our identity, can grow, which is actually the identity of the divine origin in each one of us. As Yeshua would say, the Father becomes the Son in the world. That's the same idea John Keats was talking about. Outside the religious mindset, because he points to this as a new system of salvation, so to say. The system of salvation, which is actually older than most religions. True salvation is becoming our divine self, which is the manifestation of the Holy One. In each one of its cells, the divine organism. And we must realize that even if a sudden death of the physical body takes place, if the divine intelligence that is growing within us regards us as a vessel with an incredible potential, that divine intelligence will connect again to another version of this life. If it's not already connected to several versions, actually, I've seen in dreams and visions other versions of Fernando, other versions of my biological dad in other situations, and I understand those are timelines in which maybe the soul didn't grow fully and now are part of what I call the wasteland of time. Or maybe the soul learned something in the template of the heart, and that something is incorporated to that soul, which is the divine spark growing in the world within my heart. And the same goes for you. Sometimes, if the divine intelligence senses that the vessel is no longer capable of sustaining a divine soul, it will surely change and go to another life experience, to grow in another person. That would be the so-called divine reincarnation or vertical reincarnation, which is conscious. It's not the mechanical recycling of human psychic souls, in which the energy is somehow dissolved and passed on later generations mechanically. This is why family members usually have behaviors that replicate the behaviors of their ancestors. That type of Gilgul, wheel of repetition, is not the true divine connection, which is made with the purpose of the full growth of the soul. And that's actually very rare. Very few people experience that type of conscious reincarnation, because very few people go beyond the stage of soul embryo. And this is why very few remember past lives. In one occasion I was shown another life to which my soul might have been connected. The soul is a multidimensional experience that can connect itself to several timelines and even several people. But that's even more strange. In any case, it's part of the beauty and wonder of soul making, an experience that is probably unique on this earth where there is so much variety of souls. This is probably a unique place to experience the full richness of the divine cosmos, since in this world there was a fall that should have never taken place but took place because the immaturity of divine architects that made vessels mixing divine intelligence with a carnal intelligence, the so-called serpent, the desire for outward satisfaction, the bottomless pit. And divine intelligence makes possible the reconciliation of the world to the source, the original life. An example, for instance, can be making these videos. I decided to record these videos in the outside, in this environment, because I'd like being in contact with the trees, the plants, to hear the sound of the insects and see the animals. But it's more difficult. I find more challenges than recording at home. There are many distractions. There are sometimes noises of civilization coming from afar, and many dogs barking sometimes, since they mirror the aggressive attitude of people, what they carry inside. So it's a challenge to record these videos, but they are part of my mission. It's also an accomplishment because I was always a very introverted person, very reserved, and speaking in public was not easy. Now it's easier, but it's still a challenge. And I consider this as part of my soul growth. I don't know if the Holy One will require me to keep recording these videos. I hope I can continue. My mission goes on, and the same has to be with all of you listeners. If the spark within led you to this video, it means something in you feels the truth. So the task for you is now to digest all these things and arrive to your own understanding, integrating all your experiences, which are part of the process of soul making in you. The process in which the divine acquires an identity, making this world of darkness meaningful, returning what was lost to the original source inside us. It's not somewhere else. We are not dealing with places, but the states. Even dimensions are states of consciousness. And remember, all this is a collective work. We need each other, even if it's just to say, hello, I am there. That makes the process easier somehow, alleviating the pain of the world, and makes that pain meaningful. Remember that our true self decides to come in each one of us in order to help others come out of the pain. So we don't experience pain and suffering by chance or because we are victims. We decided to experience this in order to help. Therefore, we are not accusing anyone, we are not looking for demons, we are not demonizing the world, but rather transforming it with patience. Remember also that all beings of light are a great family, but we are also sub-families, and many of us have surely met in other timelines and even other lives, living through other people in order to finish a work which is not easy to finish at once. Someday I'll speak of soulmates and soul sisters, soul friends, even twin souls and deeper connections which are revealed in us as we move onwards in this wonderful journey of soul making. Therefore, let's continue making divine soul, moving together and united in the great divine being to which we belong as beings of true light, expressing our individual blessings.